Hello, I'm from the channel Deadlight Dreams, and I bring you stories that happened right here in Brazil. And I receive many messages from viewers telling me their experiences. Today, I bring you a story sent by a subscriber. It's her letter. Please pay attention. It was suggested that I tell this story on your YouTube channel. It is a story that was told to me by my grandmother about 62 years ago. It must have been around 1962, because at the time I was 8 years old. My grandfather used to take me to the São João Batista de Taubaté fair, which took place in June in the city of Taubaté, state of São Paulo. At the foot of the stairs leading to the chapel, we saw a middle-aged woman dressed in black. The woman in black said that after they had talked to the priest, they went down the stairs and were about to leave the chapel when suddenly Bastião felt like urinating. Upon hearing this sad event, she immediately grabbed her shawl and ran to the chapel. She arrived just as the couple was leaving. My grandmother said that Maria Antonieta was a beautiful woman with long hair, dark complexion, slender figure, and was wearing a beautiful white satin dress and a long white veil. I talked to some older residents in the area, but none of them knew where the chapel might be. Suddenly, without any warning, a dense fog formed. Due to the thick fog, I had to pull off the road and stop. After about 10 minutes, the fog cleared and I was able to continue driving. At that point, I remembered that the chapel was located on that road, so I stopped to ask a passerby where the chapel of Santo Antonio was. The resident I asked said that the chapel no longer existed. He said that the place was known as Curva do Capelão because the chapel used to be on a sharp curve on the road. However, he said that there was a trail that led to the place where the chapel once stood. Excited, I parked my car and started walking. I followed the path, and after about 1 kilometer, I arrived at a clearing. I noticed several tombstones on the ground with various types of crosses carved in them. Some were small, and others were quite large. However, I did not see any remains or bones anywhere. I searched around and saw that there was a mound of dirt on the ground with weeds growing on it. I realized that this was the burial site of Maria Antonieta. I sat next to the mound for about 15 minutes, thinking about the drama that had occurred there. The peacefulness of the place was so great that I felt an indescribable calmness. I hope that one day they are able to rebuild the chapel and restore the memory of this innocent woman who lost her life there. I believe it was demolished, but I am not certain. My grandmother says she was the most beautiful bride she had ever seen in her life. As Maria Antonieta came down the stairs, Bastião tripped and fell, so my grandmother rushed to help him. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to our channel. See you next time. Suddenly, Maria Antonieta turned pale and cried out in pain. She held her chest and crumpled to the ground. People rushed to help her, but she had already passed away. Later, we learned that she had died from a heart attack. He asked permission to go to the back of the chapel to use the bathroom. As for Bastião, he was seen wandering the streets of Taubaté for a few days, completely drunk, singing and laughing. No one knows what happened to him after that. This story shocked the entire community, as everyone knew Maria Antonieta, who was extremely kind and helpful to everyone. I remember my grandmother crying as she told me this story. She said that until the day she died, she wondered why God allowed such a thing to happen. She also wondered why, after causing so much damage, Bastião was never punished. But before he could leave, he sat down on a nearby bench and fell into a deep sleep. Then he relieved himself in his pants and soiled himself. The priest became furious and refused to officiate the wedding. He said he would only do it the next day. But Bastião wanted to get married that very moment. Maria Antonieta begged the priest to forgive him and allow them to get married, saying that her entire life had been dedicated to the Lord and that she would not desecrate the temple of God. But the priest remained unmoved and left the chapel. Later, we learned that the woman was called Maria Antonia. She was about 50 years old and had never married. The woman in black was her sister. We spent many afternoons strolling through the alleys of that fair until we reached the alley of the miraculous metal, where they sold religious articles. I remember the smell of incense and wax candles mixed with the scent of fried food. It was wonderful. We turned around and were surprised to find that the entrance to the fair was blocked by a large crowd of people. We tried to find out what had happened, but no one would tell us. We were shocked to see that a large number of people were climbing the hill where the small chapel of Saint. We were shocked to see that a large number of people were climbing the hill where the small chapel of Saint Anthony stood. She told us sadly that her sister Maria Antonieta had gone to the fair alone and met a young man who introduced himself as Basilio. After a while, the two were seen entering the chapel, and soon afterwards we heard screams and commotion. According to what she said, Maria Antonieta had met a young man at the fair. They talked and danced together and ended up kissing each other. At that point, Basilio told her he loved her and asked for her hand in marriage. So they decided to go to the chapel of Santo Antonio to get married. There was a priest living in the monastery who officiated marriages, although he rarely did so. The chapel belonged to a small monastery of Carmelite nuns who lived there. I believe the chapel was built around the year 1900 and was located 3 kilometers from the center of Taubaté. When we arrived there, we were able to see what was happening. On the left side of the chapel, we saw a large number of women with shawls on their heads and veils over their faces talking in hushed tones. We managed to get close to the woman and asked what had happened. As it was Saturday, Mass was only scheduled for the following day. At that time, my grandmother was at home, helping her mother prepare dinner. After this incident, the priest returned to the chapel and continued with his activities. Years later, after my grandmother had passed away, I searched for the chapel of Santo Antonio, but could not find it. One evening, about 20 years ago, I was driving on the road between Taubaté and Salisopolis. Thank you for watching this episode of Ghost Stories.